frequently in discussions about the Antichrist. This is not a local conversation. It is not limited to prophecy circles. It is emerging in political commentary.
September 15th, 2020. The White House South Lawn. Under a blazing sun, 3 nations signed an agreement that hadn't seemed possible 6 months earlier. Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain. Standing between them, orchestrating handshakes that rewrote 70 years of Middle Eastern hostility, was a man with no diplomatic training, no military background, no previous experience in international relations. Jared Kushner had done what career diplomats said couldn't be done. He'd brought multiple Arab nations into formal peace with Israel. He'd created what they called the Abraham Accords. And within 48 hours, a question started appearing in prophecy circles, political forums, and academic discussions across 3 continents. The same question, asked by people who never talk to each other, people who disagree about everything else. Why does this agreement look exactly like the structure Daniel described 2,600 years ago? Why does it involve many nations and Israel? And why is the man who built it showing up in patterns that match the biblical description of the figure who comes before the end? That question hasn't gone away, it's gotten louder. Because what happened on that September afternoon wasn't just politics, it was architecture. The kind of framework that prophecy watchers had been tracking for decades suddenly took physical form. Multiple nations, Israel at the center, economic integration, military cooperation, technology sharing, all of it formalized in documents with legal weight, all of it negotiated by someone who appeared on the world stage through channels that bypass every traditional requirement for international influence. Kushner wasn't elected. He wasn't appointed through normal diplomatic procedures. He had no credentials that would qualify him for a role at this level. Yet within 3 years, he sat across negotiating tables from crown princes, prime ministers, and regional power brokers who had refused to meet with seasoned diplomats for generations. He succeeded where professionals had failed for 50 years. That's not normal political advancement. That's the kind of rise Daniel 11:21 describes when it speaks of a leader who comes without warning and obtains power by intrigue. The verse doesn't say he storms in through military conquest. It says he slips into position through strategic influence and timing. What makes September 15th, 2020 different from every other Middle East peace ceremony is what it set in motion. Morocco joined 4 months later. Sudan followed. Saudi Arabia began quiet normalization even without formal signing. By the end of 2021, the framework Kushner built had pulled 6 nations into agreements with Israel that included trade routes, aviation deals, tourism, intelligence sharing, and technology partnerships worth hundreds of billions of dollars. The region that had defined itself by opposition to Israel for 3 generations suddenly pivoted. And the man who made it happen has a detail in his background that keeps surfacing in these discussions. His family owns a building in Manhattan. The address is 666 Fifth Avenue. Most people dismiss it, a coincidence, a numeric quirk that means nothing. But when that number belongs to someone who just created a multi-nation covenant structure involving Israel, people studying Revelation 13:18 stop dismissing it. They start asking why the pieces keep aligning around one person. This isn't about proving anything yet. This is about recognizing that something unprecedented is happening. The conditions described in ancient prophecy are appearing in modern geopolitics, and they're appearing around a figure whose rise, timing, and achievements don't match any conventional pattern. The question isn't whether Jared Kushner is the Antichrist. The question is why the environment forming around him looks exactly like the one Daniel said would exist when that figure emerges, and whether what happened on September 15th, 2020 was the beginning of a sequence that prophecy has been warning about for 2,600 years. Every generation produces candidates, names that appear in prophecy discussions for a few months or years before fading into historical footnotes. Political leaders who seem powerful until their influence collapses. Military figures who dominate headlines until the next crisis replaces them. Religious personalities who gather followings until scandal or irrelevance removes them from consideration. The pattern repeats. A figure rises. Prophecy watchers notice. Speculation builds. Then the conditions fail to materialize. The temple doesn't appear. The covenant doesn't form. Global authority doesn't consolidate. And the conversation.
Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more awe-inspiring stories of faith, survival, and miracles.
Moves on. Kushner is different, not because he's more dramatic or more obviously sinister, because the discussion around him hasn't faded, it's intensified. 3 years after leaving the White House, his name still appears in prophecy analysis with the same frequency it did during his peak influence. The reason isn't his personality, it's the infrastructure he left behind. The Abraham Accords didn't disappear when the Trump administration ended. They expanded. New nations joined. Economic partnerships deepened. Military cooperation increased. The framework Kushner built became permanent architecture in Middle Eastern geopolitics, and that architecture continues reshaping the region in ways that align with prophetic patterns. But here's what most people miss. The Accords themselves aren't the fulfillment of Daniel 9:27. They can't be. They lack the specific 7-year framework the prophecy requires. They don't include provisions about temple worship. They haven't been broken at a midpoint. Every technical requirement prophecy scholars use to evaluate the covenant with many remains unfulfilled.
So why does Kushner's name persist in these discussions? Because what he created is a prototype, a proof of concept. He demonstrated that multi-nation agreements involving Israel are no longer theoretical. He showed that Arab states will normalize relations under the right conditions. He proved that economic integration can override decades of religious and political hostility. He built a model that future agreements can expand upon. Think about what didn't exist before September 2020. No modern precedent for multiple Arab nations simultaneously recognizing Israel. No framework for regional economic integration that included Israeli technology, Emirati capital, and Bahraini banking. No aviation agreements connecting Tel Aviv to Abu Dhabi. No tourism infrastructure allowing Israelis to visit Dubai's hotels. Kushner didn't just negotiate peace, he created entirely new systems. And those systems are the foundation for something larger. When Daniel describes a future covenant involving many nations, he's describing exactly the kind of multilateral framework the Abraham Accords established. Not the same agreement, but the same structure. This is where the timing becomes significant. Israel regained independence in 1948. It recaptured Jerusalem in 1967. But for 53 years after controlling the city, the nation remained isolated from its neighbors. Peace existed with Egypt and Jordan. Cold peace, formal but minimal. No other Arab state would touch normalization. Then Kushner appeared, and within 3 years the equation reversed. What seemed impossible for 2 generations suddenly became normal. The question prophecy watchers ask is why now? What changed in 2017 that made this possible? The surface answer is obvious. Trump's presidency gave Kushner access. His relationship with Netanyahu provided credibility with Israel. His business connections in the Gulf opened doors with Arab leaders. The combination created opportunity. But the deeper answer involves forces larger than one administration. Saudi Arabia needed regional allies against Iran. The UAE wanted Western technology and economic diversification. Bahrain required Saudi permission for any diplomatic move. Morocco wanted U.S. recognition of its territorial claims. Sudan needed removal from the state sponsor of terrorism list. Kushner didn't create these pressures, he recognized them.
and he built an agreement structure that gave each party what they needed while pulling them all into formal relationship with Israel. That's not just diplomacy, that's architectural thinking, seeing how pieces fit together before others recognize the pattern. Daniel 11:21 describes this exact quality. The future ruler doesn't conquer through obvious force. He understands how to position influence, how to offer solutions that seem beneficial to all parties while serving a larger design, how to make the impossible look inevitable. When you examine Kushner's negotiating approach, the parallels are uncomfortable. He didn't strong-arm Arab states into accepting Israel. He showed them how normalization served their interests. He made them want the agreement. He positioned himself as the architect of their success rather than an outside imposer. This is where the discussion moves from political analysis to prophetic pattern recognition, because the Bible doesn't describe the Antichrist as an obvious villain. It describes someone who solves problems, someone who brings peace, someone who appears as a benefactor before revealing his true purpose. The Abraham Accords brought peace, measurable, documented peace. Airlines fly routes that didn't exist. Trade flows through channels that were closed. Tourists visit sites they couldn't access. Technology companies partner across borders that were sealed. By every conventional metric, Kushner created something positive. But prophecy warns that the final deception won't look evil at first. It will look like solutions, like progress, like the answer everyone was seeking. The covenant with many isn't described as an obvious trap. It's described as an agreement that people want, that nations sign willingly, that appears to solve long-standing conflicts. Only at the midpoint does its true nature emerge. Only when the leader breaks the covenant and turns on Israel does the deception become visible. Until that moment, it looks like the peace the world has been waiting for. This is why Kushner's achievement generates such intense scrutiny. Not because he did something obviously sinister, because he did something that matches the pattern of what prophecy says will happen before the end. He created regional peace involving Israel and multiple nations. He built economic integration. He established frameworks for cooperation. All things the world celebrates. All things that also happen to align with the structure Daniel warned about. The second factor keeping his name in circulation is his continued involvement in the region. He didn't retire from Middle East engagement when he left government. He launched Affinity Partners, an investment firm that raised $2 billion primarily from Saudi Arabia's public investment fund. The money flows into technology companies, many of them operating in Israel and the Gulf states. He's still building connections, still deepening economic ties, still positioning himself at the intersection of Israeli innovation and Arab capital. The infrastructure he created as a government official is now the foundation for his private business. The relationships remain active. The influence continues. Most former White House advisors fade into consulting or speaking circuits. Kushner went deeper into exact the region where his diplomatic work focused. He's not maintaining relationships, he's expanding them, and the expansion involves the kind of technology that prophecy watchers find significant. Affinity Partners has invested in artificial intelligence companies, cybersecurity firms, fintech platforms, biometric identification systems. These aren't random tech sectors. These are the exact categories that could enable the kind of economic control Revelation 13:16-17 describes. The ability to restrict who can buy and sell, the infrastructure for a mark-based system. Is Kushner deliberately building tools for a future Antichrist system? Almost certainly not. Is he building tools that such a system could use? That's a different question, and it's a question that keeps his name relevant in prophecy discussions even after his government role ended. The third element is the reaction he generates, not from prophecy communities, from secular analysts, from political commentators who have no religious framework for interpretation. They notice something unusual about his trajectory, his access, his success in areas where he had no expertise. A 2019 Vanity Fair article questioned how someone with his background ended up negotiating Middle East peace. A
A Washington Post analysis examined his security clearance issues and wondered who was actually directing his policy decisions. Foreign policy journals ran pieces about the unconventional nature of his diplomatic approach. These aren't prophecy publications. These are mainstream outlets recognizing that something about his rise doesn't follow normal patterns.
When secular observers notice the same anomalies that prophecy watchers identify, it suggests the pattern is real, not imagined, not invented by people looking for end-time signs, actually present in the events themselves. The fourth factor is what hasn't happened yet. Saudi Arabia never signed the Abraham Accords. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman came close. Negotiations advanced. Plans were drafted. Then the Biden administration entered office and the momentum paused. Saudi normalization with Israel remains the missing piece, the largest prize, the agreement that would truly reshape the entire region. And Kushner maintains the closest Western relationship with MBS of any non-government official. Their connection survived the Khashoggi crisis. It survived the administration change. It survived the shift from political power to private business. The bond remains intact, which means if Saudi normalization ever happens, Kushner's network will be part of the foundation, even if he holds no official role. This creates a scenario where the framework he built could expand beyond what currently exists, where the prototype could evolve into something more comprehensive, where the multi-nation structure could add the one player that would give it true regional dominance. Not through Kushner's direct involvement necessarily, but through the architecture he established. Prophecy doesn't require that the person who builds the preliminary framework is the same person who activates the final covenant. It only requires that the framework exists when the time comes, and that framework now exists, functional, proven, ready for expansion. The fifth element is the temple movement in Jerusalem. This is where the discussion shifts from political analysis to prophetic necessity, because Daniel 9:27 isn't just about a covenant, it's about what happens in the middle of that covenant. The leader puts an end to sacrifice and offering. He enters the temple. He commits what Daniel calls the abomination that causes desolation. None of that can happen without a functioning temple. For 1950 years, that made the prophecy theoretical, impossible to fulfill. The Second Temple was destroyed in 70 AD. No serious possibility of reconstruction existed while the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque occupied the Temple Mount. The political barriers seemed absolute. But in the same years Kushner was negotiating the Abraham Accords, the temple movement in Israel accelerated. The Temple Institute completed all the implements required for temple service. They wove the priestly garments. They identified and trained potential priests from the Levitical line. They produced architectural plans. They announced the birth of red heifers, animals required for the purification ceremony that must precede temple service. These aren't fringe activities anymore. Israeli government officials now openly discuss temple reconstruction. Rabbinical courts have issued rulings on temple procedures. Financing is in place. The only remaining barrier is political access to the Temple Mount, which is exactly where the Abraham Accords become relevant, because the agreements Kushner negotiated included quiet understandings about Jerusalem access, about shared administration of holy sites, about frameworks for religious cooperation that didn't exist before. He didn't solve the Temple Mount issue, but he created diplomatic channels that could address it. He proved that previously non-negotiable positions can shift under the right conditions. When the temple movement and the multi-nation covenant framework advance simultaneously, prophecy watchers recognize the pattern, not as proof that fulfillment is happening now, as evidence that the conditions for fulfillment are forming, that pieces separated for 2,000 years are moving into proximity. And at the center of both movements stands the same figure, the man who built the diplomatic framework, the man whose business investments now flow into the same region, the man whose name appears in discussions about both peace agreements and prophetic timelines. Kushner hasn't fulfilled Daniel's prophecy, but he's revealed that the prophecy is no longer theoretical. The multi-nation covenant structure exists. The temple preparations are advancing. The technology for economic control is operational. The regional alignment is shifting. And these changes happened on an accelerated timeline that coincides exactly with his period of maximum influence. That's why his name persists. Not because he's obviously the Antichrist, because he's demonstrated that the world described in Daniel is now possible. And once possibility becomes reality, the question changes. It's no longer, could this ever happen? It becomes, when will it happen, and who will be standing in position when it does? Daniel 9:27 is the reason this discussion exists. Without this single verse, Kushner would be a former White House advisor with interesting Middle East achievements, nothing more. But this verse creates a template, a checklist, a specific description of events that must occur in a precise sequence. And when modern events start resembling that sequence, even loosely, the verse gets re-examined. The prophecy states, "He will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7. In the middle of the 7, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. And at the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation, until the end that is decreed is poured out on him." 43 words in English, fewer in the original Hebrew. But these words have generated more prophetic analysis than almost any other passage in Scripture, because they provide the timeline for the final 7 years before Christ's return, the period Christians call the tribulation, the time when the Antichrist's true nature is revealed. Every word matters. Every detail is specific. This isn't symbolic poetry. It's a technical description of political and religious events that can be verified when they occur, which means it can also be used to evaluate whether current events match the pattern. Start with the first phrase. He will confirm a covenant with many. Not create a covenant, confirm one. The Hebrew word used here means to strengthen, to make firm, to establish something that already has foundation. This suggests the agreement isn't entirely new. It builds on existing frameworks or strengthens previous arrangements. The Abraham Accords didn't emerge from nothing. They built on decades of quiet cooperation between Israel and Gulf states, intelligence sharing that existed in shadows, economic ties that operated through third parties, security coordination against common threats. Kushner didn't invent Israeli-Arab cooperation. He brought it into the open. He formalized it. He confirmed what was already developing beneath the surface. This matches the prophetic language more closely than most people realize. The future covenant won't appear as a shocking break from everything that came before. It will formalize and strengthen patterns already in motion. It will make official what was previously informal. It will confirm existing trajectories. The next word is crucial. Many. Not one nation, not two, many. The Hebrew word is rabim. It means numerous, abundant, great in number. It requires multiple parties. This eliminates bilateral agreements. It eliminates simple peace treaties between two states. It requires a coalition, a multilateral framework involving numerous participants. For most of Israel's modern history, this seemed impossible. Egypt signed a peace treaty in 1979, one nation. Jordan followed in 1994, two nations total. For the next 26 years, no progress, no movement toward many. Then, in 2020, the number jumped. UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco. 4 nations in 4 months. 6 nations total in formal peace with Israel. And this doesn't count the quiet normalization happening with Saudi Arabia, Oman, and others who haven't signed but have opened channels. The shift from 2 to 6 might not sound dramatic, but in prophetic terms, it's the difference between impossible and established pattern.
2 nations can be explained as isolated exceptions, 6 nations represent a framework, a structure, a model that others can join, which is exactly what many requires. The covenant is for 1/7. In Hebrew, 7 is the word Shabuah. It can mean a week of days or a week of years. In prophetic context, particularly in Daniel, it means 7 years. The angel Gabriel was explaining a timeline of 77s decreed for Israel. 69 of those 7s were fulfilled. 1 remains, the final 7 years. This is the non-negotiable time frame. The covenant must have a defined 7-year duration, not open-ended peace, not indefinite normalization, a specific 7-year period. This is where the Abraham Accords clearly fall short. They contain no expiration date, no 7-year term, no defined endpoint, which means they cannot be the fulfillment of Daniel 9:27. They structurally resemble it. They establish the multi-nation framework it describes, but they lack the temporal specificity the prophecy requires. They're the prototype, not the final product. But here's what changed. Before 2020, the idea of any multi-nation covenant with Israel seemed impossible. Now it's proven reality. The gap between proven reality and prophetic fulfillment is much smaller than the gap between impossibility and proven reality. The Accords demonstrated that the final covenant is logistically feasible. The mechanics work. Nations will sign. The framework holds. All that's missing is the 7-year time frame, and the right crisis could provide that. Economic collapse requiring a defined recovery period. Regional war demanding a structured peace timeline. Global instability necessitating measurable commitments. Any number of scenarios could transform an open-ended agreement into a fixed 7-year covenant. The prophecy continues in the middle of the 7. This is the mathematical center. 3.5 years, 42 months, 1,260 days. Scripture uses all these measurements to describe the same midpoint. This is when everything changes, when the mask comes off, when the leader who brought peace reveals his true purpose. He will put an end to sacrifice and offering. This requires a functioning sacrificial system, which requires a temple, which requires access to the Temple Mount, which requires either Muslim agreement, Israeli military control, or some hybrid arrangement that allows Jewish worship on the site. For 1,950 years, this verse was theoretical. No temple existed, no sacrifices occurred, no system operated that could be stopped. But the temple movement has changed the equation. The implements are ready, the priests are trained, the animals are prepared. The only missing element is political access, and political access is exactly what diplomatic agreements can provide. This is where Kushner's work intersects directly with prophetic requirements. The Abraham Accords didn't address the Temple Mount explicitly in public documents, but they created frameworks for shared religious site administration. They established precedents for previously impossible cooperation. They proved that barriers considered absolute can fall under the right conditions. If temple access ever becomes reality, it will happen through some evolution of the diplomatic architecture Kushner built, not because he planned it that way, because that's the only existing framework that could accommodate such an arrangement. The Accords are the foundation. Temple access would be the next level built on that foundation. The prophecy describes what happens at the midpoint. The leader will set up an abomination that causes desolation. Jesus referenced this exact phrase in Matthew 24:15. Paul expanded on it in 2 Thessalonians 2:4, describing a man who sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. This is self-deification. The leader enters the holy place and demands worship. He doesn't just break the covenant politically, he commits spiritual blasphemy. He claims divine authority, and this act triggers the second half of the 7 years, the period of greatest tribulation. None of this has happened. No leader has entered a temple. No one has proclaimed himself God in the holy place. No abomination has been set up. These events are still future.
which means the prophecy remains unfulfilled. But the components are assembling. The multi-nation framework exists. The temple preparations are advancing. The technology for the mark system is operational. The regional alignment is shifting. What was scattered across centuries of impossibility is now concentrated in a single generation's reality. Daniel's prophecy also identifies who makes the covenant, not by name, by position and character. The he in verse 27 connects to the ruler who will come in verse 26. This ruler comes from the people who destroyed the city and the sanctuary. Historical analysis points to Rome. The Roman Empire destroyed Jerusalem and the Second Temple in 70 AD. This suggests the future leader emerges from a revived Roman Empire, or from the geographic territory Rome controlled, or from a political system that inherits Rome's law, governance structures, and imperial reach. The United States could be understood as Rome's heir in that sense. American power projects globally as Rome's did regionally. American law derives from Roman legal principles. American governance includes Roman republican elements. If Roman means Western Empire rather than geographic Europe, Kushner fits. But this is speculative interpretation, not clear fulfillment. It's an attempt to make pieces fit rather than pieces fitting naturally. And that's important to acknowledge. Not every element of Kushner's profile aligns. Some pieces require interpretive stretching. Some require redefining traditional understandings. Some don't fit at all. The prophecy's final phrase describes the ruler's end, until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. This is divine judgment. The leader's power is temporary. His rule ends in destruction. His opposition to God results in his own annihilation. The prophecy doesn't just describe his rise and reign, it promises his fall. This is the ultimate test. The Antichrist doesn't win. He doesn't establish permanent rule. He doesn't defeat God. His entire system collapses at Christ's return. His authority is exposed as temporary and doomed, and everyone who followed him shares his fate. This theological truth shapes how believers should respond to Antichrist speculation. Not with fear, not with fascination, with confidence that God's timeline is set, that evil's window is limited, that the outcome is already determined. The prophecy doesn't warn believers to panic, it assures them to endure, because the end is guaranteed. So when examining whether Kushner or anyone else might fulfill this role, the question isn't just about pattern recognition, it's about theological understanding. The Antichrist is a temporary permitted evil, not a permanent threat, not an ultimate power, a limited actor on a stage controlled entirely by God. Daniel 9:27 provides the script, the sequence of events, the technical requirements, the timeline structure, and it reveals that whoever fulfills this role operates only within boundaries God has set. This should inform the entire discussion. Yes, identify patterns. Yes, recognize when conditions align. But no, don't treat the Antichrist as unstoppable. Don't give him more power in speculation than he'll have in reality. The prophecy is specific for a reason. So when the time comes, those who are watching will recognize the season. They won't be deceived. They won't be surprised. They'll understand what's happening because Daniel described it 26 centuries in advance. And that recognition is the point. Not to identify the Antichrist before his time, but to understand the times, to see the stage being set, to recognize when preliminary conditions become actual fulfillment, to distinguish between resemblance and reality. Kushner's achievements resemble parts of Daniel 9:27. They don't fulfill it. The resemblance is significant. It proves the prophecy is no longer theoretical, but resemblance isn't fulfillment, and maintaining that distinction is essential for honest analysis. January 20th, 2017, Jared Kushner walked into the White House as senior advisor to the president. He was 37 years old. His background included real estate development, newspaper ownership, and political donations. What it didn't include was foreign policy experience, diplomatic training, military service, intelligence work, or any conventional qualification for the role he was about to assume. Within 6 months, he was sitting across from Benjamin Netanyahu discussing Israeli settlement policy, meeting with Mahmoud Abbas about Palestinian statehood, flying to Riyadh for conversations with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman about regional security, coordinating with UAE leadership on normalization frameworks, managing relationships that career diplomats spend decades building. The question everyone asked was the same: how? How does someone with no background in this field suddenly operate at the highest levels of Middle East diplomacy? How does he gain access that others can't achieve? How does he succeed where experienced professionals have failed?
The surface answer is obvious. He married Ivanka Trump in 2009. His father-in-law won the presidency in 2016. Family connection provided access. But access doesn't explain achievement. Plenty of presidential relatives get White House positions. Very few reshape entire regions. Something about Kushner's approach worked. Something about his negotiating style succeeded. Something about his understanding of the players and pressures produced results that traditional diplomacy couldn't match. And that something is where the prophetic parallels become uncomfortable. Daniel 11:21 describes a future ruler who will arise in his place, although he will not be given the honor of kingship. He will come in a time of peace and seize the kingdom by intrigue. The verse doesn't describe military conquest, it describes strategic positioning, someone who gains power through unconventional channels, who isn't given authority through normal succession, who uses timing and influence rather than obvious force. Kushner wasn't elected. He wasn't confirmed by Senate. He didn't rise through State Department recs. He was placed into position through family connection and then used that position in ways that expanded far beyond what family ties alone could achieve. That's intrigue. That's strategic influence. That's obtaining power through channels that bypass traditional requirements. His background makes this even more striking. Kushner was raised in a modern Orthodox Jewish household in Livingston, New Jersey. His father, Charles Kushner, built a real estate empire worth billions. Jared attended Harvard, then NYU for law and business degrees. He took over the family company at 25 after his father went to prison for illegal campaign contributions, tax evasion, and witness tampering. By 30, he owned the New York Observer newspaper. By 35, he was one of New York's most prominent real estate developers. By 36, he was negotiating Middle East peace. The trajectory doesn't follow normal patterns. Each jump is larger than the previous position would naturally accommodate. But it's his religious background that generates the most speculation in prophetic contexts. He was raised in traditional Judaism, bar mitzvahed, attended Jewish day schools, married in a Jewish ceremony. His children are being raised in the Jewish faith. By all external measures, he's a practicing Jew. Yet, people close to him note that he's not particularly observant. He doesn't maintain strict kosher practice. He doesn't regularly attend synagogue outside of major holidays. He works on Sabbath. His business practices prioritize success over religious restriction. He exists in a space between traditional heritage and modern secularity. This is where Daniel 11:37 enters the discussion. He will show no regard for the gods of his ancestors, nor for the one desired by women, nor will he regard any god, but will exalt himself above them all. Traditional interpretation understands this as a Jewish leader who abandons his ancestral faith, who maintains cultural identity but rejects religious devotion. Does this describe Kushner? Partially. He hasn't abandoned Judaism, but he practices it selectively. He maintains identity without strict observance. He benefits from the cultural connections while operating outside the religious restrictions. He's Jewish enough to relate to Israeli leadership, secular enough to negotiate freely with Arab Muslims. The combination gave him unique positioning that a strictly observant Jew or a complete secular wouldn't have. This isn't proof of anything. Millions of people maintain cultural heritage while practicing religion loosely. But when that pattern appears in someone who's also creating multi-nation covenants with Israel, the prophetic parallels get noted, not as certainty, as pattern recognition. His negotiating approach reveals something else. Kushner didn't try to impose American solutions on Middle East problems. He didn't lecture parties about what they should want. He listened to what each player needed, then he built a framework that gave everyone enough to make signing worthwhile. UAE wanted F-35 fighter jets and advanced weapons systems. They got them. Bahrain needed Saudi approval for any diplomatic move. Kushner secured it before approaching them. Morocco wanted U.S. recognition of Western Sahara claims. Trump provided it. Sudan wanted removal from the terrorism list. It happened. Each party received something concrete in exchange for normalization. This is transactional diplomacy, not idealistic, not moralistic, not based on what parties should do, based on what they will do when properly motivated. It's brilliant strategic thinking, and it's exactly the kind of pragmatic deal-making Daniel associates with the future ruler. The prophecy doesn't describe an obviously evil figure. It describes someone who solves problems, who understands incentives, who makes deals that seem beneficial to all parties while serving a larger architecture. Kushner demonstrated this capacity. Whether he used it for prophetic purposes is different from whether he possesses the skill set the prophecy describes. His family's real estate holdings add another layer. The building at 666 Fifth Avenue became the most expensive single-building purchase in U.S. history when the Kushner companies bought it in 2007. Jared was 27. His father was still in prison. He led the negotiations, and he dramatically overpaid. The building never generated sufficient revenue to justify the purchase price. By 2017, the Kushner companies were trying desperately to refinance. The building was bleeding money. They needed $1.4 billion by February 2019 or face financial catastrophe. Then something unusual happened. A Qatari-linked company provided a $1.2 billion bailout. Shortly after Kushner left the White House, his firm secured $2 billion from Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, despite concerns from the fund's advisors about his lack of investment experience. The money that saved his family's most problematic asset came from the same Middle Eastern players he was negotiating with as a government official. The line between his diplomatic work and his business interests isn't just blurred, it's non-existent. And the building at the center of these financial deals carries the number 666. Most analysis dismisses the number as coincidence. Buildings have addresses. This one happens to be 666. No symbolic meaning intended, just a number assigned when the building was constructed in 1957, decades before Kushner was born. But public perception doesn't work on technical accuracy. It works on symbolism. And when the person connected to that address creates multi-nation covenants with Israel, people remember Revelation 13:18. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666. Does the address mean Kushner is the Antichrist? No. Does it contribute to why people examine him more closely than other diplomatic figures? Absolutely. Symbolism shapes perception, and perception shapes which names stay in discussion and which fade. His post-White House activities maintain his regional involvement. Affinity Partners, his investment firm, doesn't invest broadly. It focuses heavily on technology companies operating in Israel and the Gulf states, the same region where he negotiated peace, the same players he built relationships with, the same networks he established as a government official. He's still building infrastructure, still deepening economic ties, still connecting Israeli innovation with Arab capital. The work continues, it's just happening through private investment rather than government diplomacy. The influence remains active, the relationships are maintained, the architecture keeps expanding. This persistence is unusual. Most former officials step away from the regions they worked in. They avoid even the appearance of profiting from government service. They let relationships cool. They move into different sectors. Kushner did the opposite. He went deeper into exact the areas where he had governmental power. He monetized the relationships. He built business on the foundation of public service. Is this illegal? No. Is it ethically questionable? Many argue yes. But it's also strategically brilliant. He created value as an official. Now he's capturing that value as a private citizen. The knowledge he gained, the connections he built, the frameworks he established, all translate directly into business advantage. And this creates a scenario where his influence in the region could persist for decades, not through government roles, through economic power, through investment decisions, through the networks that control capital flows. He's positioned himself to remain a key player, regardless of who holds political office.
If a future Middle East crisis requires someone who understands all the parties, who has relationships across the region, who knows how to structure multi-nation agreements, who has both Israeli and Arab trust, Kushner is one of very few people who fit that description. He built the expertise, he proved the capability, he maintains the connections. The infrastructure is personal now, not positional. This is where speculation about future roles becomes relevant, not because Kushner is plotting some scheme, because circumstances could naturally return him to relevance. A regional war, an economic collapse, a crisis requiring someone with his specific combination of knowledge and relationships. Any of these scenarios could pull him back into prominence. And if that happens, the networks he's building now become the foundation for whatever comes next. The investments, the partnerships, the economic integration, all of it could serve purposes larger than current business returns. Not because he planned it that way, because that's how infrastructure works. You build it for one purpose, it gets used for another. The roads Rome built for military conquest became trade routes for centuries. Kushner's rise doesn't prove he's the Antichrist, but it demonstrates that unconventional paths to power are possible, that someone without traditional qualifications can achieve results that experts cannot, that family connection plus strategic thinking plus perfect timing can create influence that outlasts the positions that granted initial access. And it shows that the kind of figure Daniel describes, someone who comes by intrigue, who solves problems through deal-making, who gains trust across enemy lines, who builds frameworks that serve larger purposes, isn't theoretical. Such a figure can exist, can succeed, can reshape regions, because one already did. The signing ceremony on the White House lawn was political theater. The substance was in the documents, and the documents revealed something most news coverage missed. These weren't simple peace agreements, they were comprehensive economic, military, and technological integration frameworks designed to restructure the entire Middle East. Start with the UAE agreement. The Abraham Accords Declaration, signed August 13, 2020, included provisions for direct flights, telecommunications, banking, tourism, energy, healthcare, and security cooperation. Within weeks, Etihad Airways Flight 971 became the first direct commercial flight from Abu Dhabi to Tel Aviv using flight number EY971 that matched the UAE's country code. Symbolic, strategic, and immediately profitable. But the economic integration went deeper. Israeli technology companies gained access to Emirati capital. Hundreds of millions in investment deals were signed within months.
Dubai became a destination for Israeli tourists who spent heavily in hotels, restaurants, and shopping centers. Trade that had been illegal for 70 years became routine business. The military cooperation was quieter, but perhaps more significant. Intelligence sharing on Iranian activities, joint cybersecurity operations, defense technology transfers. Israel's Rafael Advanced Defense Systems began working with Emirati companies on missile defense projects. The nations that had never officially acknowledged each other's existence were suddenly coordinating military operations. The Bahrain Agreement followed similar patterns: smaller economy, smaller military, but strategically positioned in the Persian Gulf with the U.S. Fifth Fleet based in Manama. Bahrain's normalization gave Israel a formal presence in the Gulf's military nerve center, not through Israeli forces, through diplomatic and economic relationships that created integration where confrontation had existed for decades. Sudan's inclusion was different. African nation, not Gulf wealth, but strategic location on the Red Sea, and desperate need for economic assistance after decades of sanctions and isolation. Sudan's agreement was transactional. They got removed from the state sponsors of terrorism list. They got access to international financing. They got diplomatic normalization with the West. In exchange, Israel got another Arab nation recognizing its existence and pledging peaceful relations. Morocco brought North African reach, tourist destinations that Israelis could visit, cultural exchange that had existed underground for years finally legitimized, and strategic positioning facing Europe across the Mediterranean. Each agreement added geographic diversity. Each one pulled a different piece of the Arab world into formal relationship with Israel. But here's what made the accords structurally unique. They weren't simple peace treaties. They were a framework that nations could join. UAE didn't just sign peace with Israel. They joined an agreement structure. When Bahrain signed, they joined the same framework. When Sudan and Morocco followed, they expanded it. The model was designed for growth. This is the covenant with many structure, not one agreement between two parties, a framework that accommodates multiple participants, that grows over time, that creates network effects where each new member increases the value for existing members. Israeli technology reaches more markets. Arab capital finds more investment opportunities. Tourism expands across more destinations. Security cooperation covers more geography. The Abraham Accords created an economic and security alliance, an integrated bloc. Countries didn't just stop fighting, they started cooperating in ways that made future conflict economically irrational. When UAE businesses invest billions in Israeli companies, war becomes bad business. When Israeli technology powers Emirati infrastructure, confrontation threatens both economies. Integration creates interdependence. Interdependence creates peace that self-enforces through shared interests. This is sophisticated international architecture, not just diplomacy, strategic design. Someone understood that peace based on mutual benefit lasts longer than peace based on imposed agreements. Someone recognized that economic integration creates more durable bonds than political declarations. Someone designed a system that incentivizes expansion and punishes defection. That someone was Kushner. He didn't just broker agreements, he designed the structure those agreements fit into. And that structure resembles the framework Daniel describes: multi-nation, Israel-focused, economically integrated, strategically comprehensive, growing rather than static. The missing piece is Saudi Arabia. The kingdom never signed. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman came close. By all accounts, he wanted to. The Trump administration pushed hard for it. Netanyahu desperately wanted it, but MBS held back, waiting for the right moment, the right price, the right political cover. Because Saudi normalization is different.
The kingdom holds Islam's holiest sites. It positions itself as guardian of Islamic interests. It can't casually recognize Israel without facing massive internal and regional backlash. The cost is higher, which means the reward must be higher too. Reports suggest MBS wanted a U.S. defense treaty, formal alliance status similar to NATO, advanced weapons systems, including nuclear technology, and something regarding the Palestinian issue that would provide political cover. The Trump administration was willing to deliver much of this, but time ran out. Biden entered office. The momentum stalled. But the relationship between MBS and Kushner didn't stall. If anything, it deepened. The $2 billion Saudi investment in Kushner's fund came after he left government, after he had no official power, after he couldn't deliver governmental benefits. Saudi Arabia invested anyway. Why? Because the relationship was real, because the trust was established, because MBS sees Kushner as a long-term partner regardless of current political positions, and because Saudi Arabia is playing a longer game than one U.S. administration. If Saudi normalization ever happens, Kushner's networks will be part of it. Not necessarily Kushner personally, but the frameworks he built, the relationships he established, the economic integration model he proved works. The Abraham Accords would expand from 6 nations to 7, and that 7th nation would give the framework dominance over the entire Gulf region.
Let's start with the man himself. If you're unfamiliar with Jared Kushner, here's what matters. He married Ivanka Trump. He served as senior advisor during Trump's first term, and during that time, he did something remarkable.
This is where the prophetic template becomes clearer. Daniel doesn't describe a covenant that appears fully formed. He describes one that is confirmed, strengthened, built upon. The Abraham Accords are foundation. Saudi Arabia would be the capstone, the piece that completes the architecture. And there's another element buried in the agreements that doesn't get discussed much: religious site access. The public documents focus on economic and security cooperation, but quiet understandings address Jerusalem, access for Muslims from normalizing nations to Al-Aqsa Mosque, frameworks for shared administration of holy sites, recognition of multi-faith interests in the city. This doesn't solve the Temple Mount issue, but it creates precedent. If Muslims from UAE can visit Jerusalem under these agreements, why not expanded access for Jews to certain areas of the Temple Mount? If multi-faith administration works for some sites, why not explore it for others? The agreements don't provide answers. They create space where questions that were previously forbidden can be asked. The Israeli religious right recognized this immediately. They saw the Accords as potentially opening doors that have been sealed since 1967. Not immediately, not obviously, but creating diplomatic frameworks where previously impossible negotiations might become possible, where temple access moves from fantasy to distant but conceivable reality. This is where Kushner's diplomatic achievement intersects directly with prophetic requirements. Daniel 9:27 requires temple access. Access requires either military conquest or diplomatic agreement. Military conquest would trigger regional war and international intervention. Diplomatic agreement is the only path that could work. And diplomatic agreement requires exactly the kind of multi-nation framework the Abraham Accords established. The technology components of the agreements are equally significant. Israel is a cybersecurity superpower, surveillance technology leader, biometric identification pioneer. Companies like NSO Group, Pegasus spyware, and AnyVision facial recognition represent the cutting edge of digital control systems. The Gulf states wanted access to these technologies. The Accords provided it. Within months of signing, Israeli companies were installing systems in UAE, facial recognition at Dubai airports, cybersecurity for Emirati government networks, digital payment systems integrating Israeli fintech with Gulf banking. The technology that could enable Revelation 13's mark system was being deployed through relationships the Accords created. Is this intentional preparation for Antichrist infrastructure? Almost certainly not. Is it building the technological foundation such a system would require? That's harder to dismiss, because the tools now exist. The integration is happening. The precedent is set. Israeli surveillance technology plus Arab capital plus mutual security interests equals comprehensive digital control systems. The Accords also changed the Palestinian equation. For decades, Arab states insisted they wouldn't normalize with Israel until the Palestinian issue was resolved. The Accords shattered that position. UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco normalized without Palestinian statehood, without Jerusalem resolution, without right of return. They abandoned the Palestinian cause as a prerequisite. This isolates the Palestinians, removes their veto over Arab-Israeli relations, and creates pressure for them to accept whatever terms Israel offers, because waiting for Arab support is no longer a viable strategy. The Accords didn't solve the Palestinian issue. They removed it as an obstacle to regional realignment. This is geopolitically brilliant and morally questionable. Palestinians are the one group that loses leverage from these agreements. Their cause gets marginalized. Their supporters move on. Their ability to resist Israeli pressure decreases. Whether this is good or bad depends on your perspective, but it's definitely significant for any future comprehensive Middle East agreement. Because Daniel's covenant involves Israel and many, it doesn't specifically mention Palestinians. If a future 7-year agreement emerges from the Abraham Accords framework, it might not include Palestinian statehood at all. It might normalize Israeli control of the West Bank. It might formalize permanent status quo, and the Palestinians might have no choice but to accept it because Arab support has already moved elsewhere. This is where the Accords as prototype becomes clearest. They demonstrate what a future comprehensive agreement might look like: multi-nation, economic integration, security cooperation, technology sharing, religious site frameworks, and marginalization of groups that oppose normalization. The template is established, the model is proven, the expansion path is clear. The agreements also included provisions for future members, open architecture. Any Arab or Muslim nation could join the framework. The structure accommodates expansion. This isn't accidental, it's designed for growth. Each new member strengthens the network. Each addition makes the framework more valuable to existing participants. As of 2024, additional nations are negotiating. Oman is close. Saudi Arabia remains the ultimate prize. Indonesia, the world's largest Muslim nation, has discussed it. Pakistan's economic crisis makes normalization more likely. The framework could eventually include a dozen nations, 20. However many find the economic and security benefits outweigh the political costs of recognizing Israel. And that's when a framework becomes a bloc. When enough nations participate that it reshapes regional power dynamics entirely. When being outside the agreement means economic isolation. When joining becomes necessary rather than optional. When the network effects create their own gravity. This is how covenant with many gets fulfilled. Not through forced imposition, through incentive structures that make joining the rational choice, through integration that makes opposition costly, through networks that become too valuable to remain outside. Daniel doesn't describe military conquest, he describes agreement, willing participation, nations choosing to join a framework that seems beneficial until the midpoint reveals its true cost. The Accords aren't that final covenant, but they're the most significant step toward it in modern history. They prove the concept works. They demonstrate that multi-nation frameworks involving Israel are achievable. They establish precedent for economic, military, and religious integration. They create the template a future agreement can build upon. And the man who designed this template now invests Saudi billions into companies operating across the same framework. The structure isn't just diplomatic anymore. It's economic, it's technological, it's infrastructural. The networks Kushner built as a government official are becoming permanent features of regional interaction. When the next crisis comes, and it will come, these networks will be the foundation for whatever solution emerges. Not because Kushner controls them, because they exist.
because roads once laid determine where traffic flows. The question isn't whether the Accords fulfilled Daniel 9:27. They didn't. The question is whether they built the framework that a future covenant will use, whether they established the precedent, whether they proved the model, whether they created the architecture that only needs a 7-year time frame and temple provisions to match the prophecy exactly. And if that framework exists, if it's proven, if it's expanding, then whoever leads it at the decisive moment steps into position Daniel described 2,600 years ago. Not because they planned it, because the infrastructure was already there, waiting for the right crisis, the right leader, the right moment. The temple isn't theoretical anymore. For 1950 years, the idea of a third Jewish temple was purely theological, a prophecy that seemed impossible to fulfill. The Second Temple was destroyed in 70 AD by Roman legions. The site was conquered by Muslims in 637 AD. The Dome of the Rock was built in 691 AD. Al-Aqsa Mosque followed. For over 13 centuries, the Temple Mount has been under Islamic control. Even after Israel captured Jerusalem in 1967, the government didn't change the religious status quo. Muslims retained administrative control over the Temple Mount. Jews could visit but not pray there. Building a temple seemed politically impossible, religiously forbidden by Islamic authorities, practically unachievable without triggering regional war. But something changed in the last decade. The temple movement in Israel shifted from fringe religious dream to active preparation. And the preparation is serious, detailed, expensive, coordinated. This isn't fantasy, this is planning. The Temple Institute in Jerusalem has spent 30 years recreating every implement required for temple service. The golden menorah, the altar of incense, the copper laver, the silver trumpet, the priestly garments woven according to biblical specifications with precise thread counts and colors. Over 70 vessels and implements are complete, ready for use, displayed in the Institute's museum, waiting for the day the temple stands. They've identified and trained priests, men from verified Levitical lineage, Cohen ancestry traced through genealogical records and genetic testing. These men have studied the procedures, learned the rituals, practiced the movements. They're ready to serve. They're just waiting for a building.
The architectural plans are done. Multiple designs exist. Some propose building alongside the Dome of the Rock. Some suggest the temple's original location is north of the dome, making Muslim shrines irrelevant. Some envision shared site administration. Some assume the dome will be removed. The plans exist. The debates are about location and politics, not whether it's possible. Then there are the red heifers. Numbers 19 describes a purification ceremony requiring a pure red heifer without blemish. The ashes of this animal are necessary for ritual cleanliness before priests can serve in the temple. For centuries, finding an animal meeting the biblical requirements seemed impossible. Modern cattle breeding produces varied colors. Pure red is extremely rare. In September 2022, the Temple Institute announced that 5 red heifers had been imported from Texas, bred specifically to meet biblical requirements, examined by rabbinical authorities, certified as potentially valid. The heifers would need to remain unblemished until old enough for the ceremony, but for the first time in 2,000 years, qualified animals existed in Israel. This isn't symbolic, this is logistics. The temple movement isn't waiting for miraculous provision. They're breeding cattle, weaving garments, training priests, building implements, drafting architectural plans. They're treating temple reconstruction as an achievable project, requiring proper preparation. And they're not alone. Israeli government officials now openly discuss the temple. Knesset members visit the Temple Mount regularly. Ministers have called for changing the status quo. Public opinion polling shows increasing support among Israeli Jews for rebuilding. What was fringe 20 years ago is mainstream conversation now. The political barriers remain immense. Building on the Temple Mount would trigger immediate conflict with Palestinians. It would inflame the entire Muslim world. It would risk Israeli peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan. It could collapse the Abraham Accords before they expand. the international backlash would be severe. But here's what the Abraham Accords changed. They proved that previously impossible diplomatic achievements can happen. They demonstrated that Arab positions that seemed absolute can shift. They showed that with the right framework, agreements that were forbidden become thinkable. If UAE and Bahrain can normalize with Israel without resolving the Palestinian issue, perhaps other impossible things can become possible. If economic incentives can overcome 70 years of hostility, perhaps they can overcome religious barriers to shared holy site access. If the unthinkable happened once, it might happen again. This is where Kushner's diplomatic work connects to temple prophecy. He didn't negotiate temple access, but he created frameworks where such negotiations might become conceivable. He proved that when conditions align, impossible agreements happen. And temple access is just another impossible agreement waiting for the right conditions. Daniel chapter 9, verse 27 requires not just a temple, but active sacrifice and offering, a functioning priesthood, regular ritual services. This means the temple can't just be a symbolic structure, it must be operational, which means priests performing duties, animals being sacrificed, the full ceremonial system functioning as it did before 70 AD. The temple movement is preparing for exactly this, not a memorial, not a museum, an active temple with daily services. They understand that prophecy requires function, not just form, and they're preparing to deliver both. Matthew chapter 24, verse 15 adds another detail. So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Jesus is referencing Daniel's prophecy, confirming it's literal, warning that when this event happens, immediate action is required. The abomination occurs in the holy place, the temple, the inner sanctuary. This is where the future ruler commits his ultimate blasphemy, where he declares himself God, where he demands worship, where he breaks the covenant and reveals his true nature. Paul expands the description in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. Don't let anyone deceive you in any way, for that day will not come until the rebellion occurs and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the man doomed to destruction. He will oppose and will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worshipped, so that he sets himself up in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. This is self-deification, not just political authority, religious claims. The leader doesn't just break a political covenant, he commits spiritual blasphemy, and he does it in the most sacred location in Judaism, the holy place, where only the high priest could enter once per year, the space representing God's presence on earth. For this to happen, the temple must exist, it must be functioning, it must be accessible to someone with enough authority to enter it, and that entry must be significant enough to trigger the immediate flight Jesus warns about. None of this has happened. No temple stands, no priesthood serves, no abomination has occurred. These events remain future, but the preparation for them is present, and that's what makes this moment different from every previous generation. For 1900 years, temple prophecy was theoretical. Now it's practical. The gap between current reality and prophetic fulfillment is smaller than it's ever been, not because prophecy changed, because reality caught up. The temple movement accelerated during the exact period when Kushner was negotiating the Abraham Accords. Both developments happened simultaneously. The diplomatic framework for regional peace and the religious preparation for temple service advanced together. Separate movements, but parallel timing and potentially connected futures. Because if Saudi Arabia ever normalizes with Israel, the price will be high. MBS will demand concessions. One possible demand is Jerusalem access frameworks that give Muslim nations formal roles in holy site administration. Another is Saudi funding for religious institutions in Jerusalem. Another is agreements about Temple Mount status. If such negotiations happen, they could inadvertently create space for Jewish temple access, not as the goal, as a side effect. Muslims get expanded access and administrative roles. Jews demand equal treatment. Negotiations lead to compromise. Compromise includes limited Jewish access to certain Temple Mount areas. Limited access becomes regular access. Regular access creates the temple, explains where the final events unfold. But Revelation 13 explains how the Antichrist consolidates power. And that system isn't coming, it's already here. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. For 2,000 years, that verse seemed impossible. How could one person control all commerce? How could buying a loaf of bread require permission from a central authority? How could economic participation be monitored and restricted globally? The technology didn't exist. It does now.
And Jared Kushner's name appears in both the diplomatic architecture that could permit the temple and the technological infrastructure that could enable the mark. The digital currency revolution. Let's start with something most people aren't paying attention to. Central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. These aren't cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. They're government-issued digital money that would replace physical cash entirely. Programmable money, money that comes with conditions, money that can be turned off. As of January 2024, 130 countries representing 98% of global GDP are exploring or piloting CBDCs. The Bahamas launched the Sand Dollar in 2020. Nigeria launched the e-Naira in 2021. China's digital yuan is already operational in over 260 million wallets across 25 cities. India is piloting the digital rupee with 1 million users. The European Central Bank is in advanced development of the digital euro, with full implementation expected by 2025-2026. The United States Federal Reserve released a discussion paper on a digital dollar in 2022, with pilot programs running in partnership with major banks. This isn't theoretical. This isn't conspiracy theory. These are official government programs documented in central bank reports. Now here's what makes this relevant to our discussion. Digital currencies are programmable. That means the issuer can attach conditions to how, when, and where you spend your money. They can set expiration dates, geographic restrictions, purchase category limitations. They can turn your money off. China's system already does this. Their social credit system integrates with digital payment platforms. Certain scores restrict your ability to buy plane tickets, to enroll your children in private schools, to purchase property. The infrastructure for "no one may buy or sell except" doesn't require a religious enforcement mechanism. It just requires your money to be digital and programmable. What happened in Canada in 2022 showed how quickly this can be deployed. During the trucker protests, the government froze the bank accounts of protesters and anyone who donated to them. Without trial, without due process. One command: accounts frozen, no access to money they had earned and saved. That was traditional banking. Imagine the same power over purely digital currency that exists only as data on government servers. Biometric integration. But it gets more specific to Revelation's prophecy. A mark on their right hand or on their foreheads. India's Aadhaar system has enrolled 1.3 billion people in a biometric database that links fingerprints and iris scans to government services, banking, and commerce. You cannot participate in Indian economic life without it. China's facial recognition network can identify any of its 1.4 billion citizens within seconds. It's integrated with payment systems, transportation access, and government services. The World Economic Forum, the organization that hosts annual meetings in Davos with global leaders, has been promoting digital identity systems since 2016. Their materials explicitly discuss integrating biometric identification with financial systems.
In September 2023, the European Union passed regulations requiring biometric identification for certain financial transactions above specific thresholds. The UAE, one of the Abraham Accords signatories, launched a national digital identity system in 2020 that integrates Emirates IDs with facial recognition, banking, and government services. Amazon has been testing palm scanning payment systems called Amazon One since 2020. You wave your hand over a scanner and payment processes automatically. Your right hand. Microsoft received a patent in 2020, patent WO 2020-060606, for a system that uses human biological data, essentially biometric monitoring, linked to cryptocurrency systems. The patent number caught attention in prophecy circles for obvious reasons. But set aside the numerical coincidence. Read what the patent actually describes: a system where human biological data is monitored and used to verify identity and authorize transactions. A mark, on or in the body, required to buy or sell. The technology exists. The infrastructure is being built globally. The integration is happening in real time. Kushner's post-White House investments. Now let's connect this to Jared Kushner specifically. In 2021, 6 months after leaving the White House, Kushner launched Affinity Partners, a private equity firm. The firm's first and largest investor was Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, which committed $2 billion. This is the same Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, that Kushner developed close relations with during his time as Middle East envoy. The UAE committed another $200 million. Both nations are Abraham Accords participants. Now here's where it gets interesting. Affinity Partners' investment focus includes 3 sectors: technology, healthcare, and financial services in Israel, the Gulf states, and globally. Specifically, the firm has invested in or partnered with companies developing digital payment infrastructure, cybersecurity and surveillance technology, healthcare AI and biometric monitoring systems, supply chain tracking technology. In December 2022, Affinity Partners invested in an Israeli startup called Sling that develops technology for cross-border payments and digital financial infrastructure connecting Middle Eastern markets. In 2023, the firm invested in a company developing biometric authentication systems for financial transactions. These aren't coincidental side projects. Kushner's post-political career is focused on building technological and financial infrastructure connecting the exact nations involved in the Abraham Accords. The same diplomatic framework that created unprecedented cooperation between Israel and Arab states is now being used to build integrated technological systems. The Abraham Accords' hidden framework. Remember what we said earlier about the economic components of the Abraham Accords. They weren't just about diplomatic recognition. Article 5 of the UAE-Israeli Normalization Agreement specifically calls for cooperation in banking and finance and innovation and trade and economic relations. The Bahrain Agreement includes provisions for financial services cooperation. In October 2020, 1 month after the accords were signed, Israel and the UAE signed a separate agreement on technological cooperation, including cybersecurity, AI, and digital infrastructure. In 2021, the UAE and Israel launched a joint $100 million fund specifically for food and water technology, including supply chain monitoring systems. The Abraham Accords created the diplomatic permission structure. The follow-up agreements created the technological integration framework. And Kushner's private equity fund is now investing in companies that build the actual systems. Let's say this clearly. We're not claiming Kushner is secretly building the Mark of the Beast system,
but we are documenting that the diplomatic relations he architected have led directly to technological and financial integration between nations that were enemies 5 years ago. And that integration involves the exact technologies, digital currency, biometric identification, and centralized transaction monitoring. The Revelation 13 describes. The Saudi component. There's one more piece that deserves attention. Saudi Arabia, the most influential Arab nation, still hasn't formally joined the Abraham Accords. They've been in negotiations for normalization with Israel since 2021. Those negotiations accelerated in 2023, with U.S. officials describing an agreement as imminent before the October 7th Hamas attacks paused discussions. What has Saudi Arabia demanded in exchange for normalization? According to reporting from Axios, The Wall Street Journal, and The Times of Israel throughout 2023, the Saudi conditions include U.S. security guarantees and advanced weapons systems, U.S. support for Saudi nuclear energy development, Israeli concessions on Palestinian statehood pathway, and, significantly, technological cooperation and investment. That last point is crucial. Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 economic plan, championed personally by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, focuses on diversifying the economy beyond oil through technology, financial services, and smart city development. The Crown Prince specifically wants Western and Israeli
technology partnerships to build Saudi Arabia's digital infrastructure. The same Crown Prince who gave Kushner's firm $2 billion. If and when Saudi Arabia normalizes relations with Israel, the Abraham Accords will include the entire Gulf region in an integrated economic, military, and technological network. A network that would span from Morocco to Oman. A network that would include the 3 Abrahamic faiths. A network that would create a shared economic zone with integrated digital systems. What this means for prophecy. Revelation 13 describes economic controls so complete that individual transactions require authorization. For 1900 years, that was administratively impossible. For the last 100 years, it was theoretically possible, but technologically impractical. For the last 20 years, the technology existed, but the political will and infrastructure didn't. Right now, today, in 2024, over 130 nations are actively building this infrastructure. The European Union will likely launch its digital euro within 2 years. China's system is already operational. India's biometric integration is complete. The technology is built. The systems are being tested. The infrastructure is going live. It doesn't require the Antichrist to create it. It just requires him to take control of it when the moment comes. And the diplomatic framework that could unify the Middle East, the region where Revelation's final events unfold, was architected by a man who is now investing in the technological systems that could enable economic control. We're not saying Kushner built this intentionally for prophetic purposes. We're saying the pieces are assembling, and his name appears on multiple pieces. The activation question. Here's the question that should keep prophecy watchers awake at night. These systems exist for practical reasons. Governments want to reduce tax evasion. Banks want to cut transaction costs. Businesses want efficient payments. No conspiracy required, just normal institutional incentives. But what happens when the next major crisis hits? A financial collapse, a cyber attack, a pandemic, a war? What happens when governments tell populations that for security, for safety, for efficiency, the old system has to go and the new integrated system has to be mandatory? We're moving to digital currency to stop terrorist financing. We're requiring biometric ID to prevent fraud. We're integrating the systems to ensure supply chain security. Every technical capability will be justified by legitimate-sounding security concerns, and the population will accept it because the alternative is chaos. The infrastructure doesn't need to be built during the tribulation. It needs to exist before the tribulation so it can be activated during the crisis. And it does exist right now. What happened in March 2023 should have gotten more attention. After Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, there was a 48-hour period when serious economists and policymakers publicly discussed whether the crisis required emergency implementation of central bank digital currencies to stabilize the system. It didn't happen. The crisis was contained through traditional measures, but the conversation happened. The option was discussed. The next crisis might be the one where emergency becomes permanent, where temporary becomes mandatory, where optional becomes required. And the man whose diplomatic work created the framework for Middle East integration is now positioned in the private sector to profit from the technological integration that follows. Kushner isn't controlling this system, but he's connected to it, on multiple levels, in multiple nations, with access to the exact leaders who would need to cooperate for a regional and eventually global system to work. We're not looking at the mark of the beast, not yet, but we're looking at the infrastructure that could become the mark of the beast if the right person took control at the right moment during the right crisis. The question isn't whether the technology exists, it does. The question is what happens when someone uses it. So let's do what most prophecy analysis fails to do. Let's be honest about where Kushner doesn't match the biblical criteria. Because if we're going to take scripture seriously, we have to take all of it seriously, not just the parts that seem to fit. The 7-year covenant problem. Daniel 9:27 is specific. He shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. 1 week. In prophetic Hebrew, that's 7 years. Not a framework for peace, not an agreement with expansion possibilities, a specific, defined 7-year covenant. The Abraham Accords have no 7-year component. They're normalization agreements with no specified end date. They're designed to be permanent diplomatic recognition, not temporary arrangements. Some have tried to argue that the week could be symbolic, but that creates interpretive chaos. If the 7 years is symbolic, then what about the 3.5-year midpoint when the covenant is broken? Is that symbolic too? If we make the numbers symbolic, the entire prophetic timeline collapses into subjective interpretation, where anything could mean anything. The text says 7 years. The Abraham Accords don't have a 7-year structure. That's a significant failure to match the prophecy. Unless, and this is important, unless the Abraham Accords aren't the covenant, but rather the diplomatic foundation that makes the covenant possible. More on that in the next section. For now, mark this clearly. Kushner's achievement doesn't fulfill Daniel's 7-year requirement. The authority problem. The Antichrist is described throughout Daniel and Revelation as having global authority. Daniel 7:23 says, "The fourth beast shall devour the whole earth." Revelation 13:7 says, "Authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation." Jared Kushner has no governmental authority. He's a private citizen. He was never elected to anything. His only official role was as a senior advisor in his father-in-law's administration, and that ended in January 2021. He currently has exactly as much governmental power as any other wealthy private equity investor, which is to say, significant economic influence but zero legal authority. He can't command armies, he can't issue laws, he can't enforce compliance. Some might argue that his connections to powerful leaders constitute authority. They don't. Having Mohammed bin Salman's phone number is not the same as having a throne. The biblical Antichrist doesn't work behind power, he is the power. Kushner clearly isn't there. He's not even in government anymore. The temple desecration problem. This is the non-negotiable checkpoint. Matthew 24:15 quotes Jesus directly. "Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place." 2 Thessalonians 2:4 describes the Antichrist as one who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. The Antichrist must, 1. Enter the Jewish temple, 2. Declare himself to be God, 3. Demand worship, 4. Desecrate the holy place. This is the midpoint sign, the unmistakable marker, the event that starts the final 3.5 years of tribulation. Jared Kushner has done none of this, obviously, because there is no temple to enter, and even if there were, there's zero indication that Kushner has religious messianic aspirations. He's not claiming divinity, he's not demanding worship, he's not positioning himself as a rabbi, a prophet, or a spiritual leader of any kind.
The Antichrist is fundamentally a religious figure who demands religious worship. Kushner is a businessman and former political operative. There's no comparison. The resurrection and supernatural signs. Revelation 13 describes the Antichrist experiencing what appears to be a fatal wound that is healed. I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. This is often interpreted as either a literal resurrection or a recovery from an assassination attempt so dramatic it appears miraculous. Jared Kushner has experienced no such event. There's been no moment where he appeared to die and came back, no assassination attempt, no supernatural recovery. Additionally, Revelation 13 describes the false prophet performing great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Whether these are literal supernatural acts or advanced technological deceptions, they represent displays of power that convince the world of the Antichrist's authority. Kushner has performed no signs, no wonders, no miracles, real or fabricated. He's operated entirely within normal political and business channels. The worship problem. Here's the clearest disqualification. Revelation 13:8 says, "All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life." Worship, not respect, not political support, not economic cooperation. Worship, religious devotion directed at a person claiming to be divine. No one is worshiping Jared Kushner. No one is building temples to him. No religious movement has formed around him. He's not even particularly popular. A significant portion of both American political parties view him negatively. Many on the right see him as a liberal influence on Trump. Many on the left see him as complicit in policies they opposed. He's not beloved globally.
He's not even beloved nationally. The Antichrist doesn't just have political power. He commands religious devotion from the majority of humanity. Kushner commands nothing of the sort. The broken covenant. The midpoint of the 7-year tribulation is marked by the Antichrist breaking his covenant. Daniel 9:27. In the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. The Antichrist makes a covenant, maintains it for 3.5 years, then violates it dramatically by stopping Jewish temple worship and declaring himself God. It's a betrayal, a calculated breaking of an agreement. The Abraham Accords haven't been broken. They're still in effect. The UAE still has diplomatic relations with Israel. Bahrain still has diplomatic relations with Israel. Morocco and Sudan still recognize Israel. The agreements have held for over 3 years now, with no indication of Kushner or anyone else working to undermine them. If anything, the trend is toward expansion, not destruction. So there's no broken covenant, no betrayal, no dramatic midpoint shift. The honest assessment. If we're using biblical criteria as a checklist, Kushner fails on multiple points. No 7-year covenant, no governmental authority, no temple desecration, no claim to divinity, no demand for worship, no supernatural signs, no broken agreement. That's 7 major prophetic requirements, and he fulfills 0 of them. So the answer to our title question seems clear. Jared Kushner is not the Antichrist. He doesn't meet the biblical criteria. He's not even close on the most important points. Case closed. Except, what if we're asking the wrong question? What if the significance of Kushner isn't that he is the Antichrist, but that he's revealed how close we are to the conditions that would allow the Antichrist to emerge? Because while Kushner fails the test, the infrastructure he helped create passes it. The diplomatic framework exists. The technological systems exist. The regional alignments exist. The temple movement exists. All the conditions are present. They just haven't been activated yet. Think of it this way. Kushner isn't the Antichrist, but he might be the set designer who built the stage, and the play is about to begin. The question that's been driving this entire investigation is the wrong question. Is Jared Kushner the Antichrist? No, he's not. But that no isn't the end of the discussion. It's the beginning of a much more important one.
because what Kushner's emergence has revealed is that the conditions described in biblical prophecy, conditions that seemed impossible for most of history, are now operational. The stage is set, the infrastructure is built, the pieces are in position. We're not waiting for the conditions to develop anymore. We're waiting for someone to activate them. The three timelines converging. There are three major prophetic timelines that biblical scholars have tracked for decades. For most of history, these timelines couldn't coexist. Now they do. Timeline 1, Israel's rebirth, 1948. Ezekiel 37 describes a vision of dry bones coming back to life, interpreted as Israel being reborn as a nation after centuries of dispersion. I will take you from among the nations, gather you out of all countries, and bring you into your own land. For 1878 years after the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, there was no nation of Israel. The Jewish people were scattered globally. No centralized government, no homeland, no temple. That made most end times prophecy literally impossible. How could the Antichrist make a covenant with Israel if Israel didn't exist? How could the temple be desecrated if there was no nation to build it? How could the armies of the world surround Jerusalem if Jerusalem wasn't a Jewish-controlled city? Then May 14, 1948 happened. Israel declared independence. For the first time in nearly 2 millennia, there was a Jewish state. The prophetic clock that had been paused for nearly 1,878 years started ticking again. Timeline 2, Jerusalem under Jewish control, 1967. But Israel's rebirth wasn't enough. Prophecy specifically focuses on Jerusalem, the city where the temple stood, the city where the abomination of desolation must occur, the city that Zechariah 12 verse 3 describes as a very heavy stone for all peoples. When Israel was reborn in 1948, Jerusalem was divided. The old city, where the Temple Mount is located, was controlled by Jordan. Jews couldn't access their holiest site. The temple couldn't be rebuilt on a site controlled by a Muslim nation. The prophecy still couldn't be fulfilled. Then June 7, 1967 happened. During the Six-Day War, Israeli forces captured East Jerusalem, including the Temple Mount. For the first time since 70 AD, Jerusalem was under unified Jewish control. Suddenly, temple construction wasn't just theoretically possible, it was geographically possible. Timeline 3, Regional Alignment with Israel, 2020. But there was still a problem. Daniel 9:27 says the Antichrist makes a covenant with many, not just one nation, multiple parties. For 70 years after Israel's founding, peace agreements with Arab nations were rare and limited. Egypt in 1979, Jordan in 1994. That's it. 2 agreements in 45 years. The broader Arab world maintained a unified rejection of Israel's existence. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco all refused recognition. How could a regional covenant happen when the most of the region refused to negotiate? Then September 15, 2020 happened. The Abraham Accords weren't one agreement. They were a framework that brought multiple Arab nations into normalization with Israel simultaneously. For the first time in history, a multi-party Middle Eastern agreement involving Israel existed. Not a bilateral treaty, a regional framework, a covenant with many. The prophetic convergence. Now here's what's crucial. These 3 timelines, Israel's existence, Jerusalem's control, and regional alignment couldn't coexist until 2020. From 1948 to 1967, Israel existed but didn't control Jerusalem. From 1967 to 2020, Israel controlled Jerusalem but had no regional diplomatic framework. Since 2020, all 3 conditions exist simultaneously, and they exist in the same generation. Jesus said in Matthew 24:32 through 34, "Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near, at the doors. Assuredly, I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. A generation that sees the fig tree, often interpreted as Israel, put forth leaves, will see the fulfillment. If we're using biblical generation as 70 to 80 years, Psalm 90:10, we're now 76 years from Israel's founding, 54 years from Jerusalem's reunification, and 4 years from the regional alignment. The convergence isn't theoretical, it's historical. It happened in our lifetime, the technology timeline. But it's not just the political conditions, it's the technological ones. We already covered the digital currency and biometric systems, but zoom out further. Revelation 11:9-10 describes the 2 witnesses lying dead in Jerusalem. Then those from the peoples, tribes, tongues, and nations will see their dead bodies 3.5 days, and those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them. How could people globally see dead bodies in Jerusalem in real time? For 1900 years, impossible. For most of the 20th century, impractical. In 2024, trivial. Live streaming, social media, satellite feeds. Billions of people can watch events in Jerusalem simultaneously on devices in their pockets. Revelation 13:15 says the image of the beast will speak and cause those who don't worship to be killed. For centuries, that seemed ancient mythological language. Then we invented screens.
And AI and deepfakes. Now an image that speaks and interacts is normal technology. We're not saying these technologies are the fulfillment. We're saying the technological barriers to fulfillment no longer exist. The geopolitical alignment. Ezekiel 38. There's another prophecy that's aligning simultaneously. Ezekiel 38 describes a coalition of nations attacking Israel. Magog, often identified as Russia, Persia, Iran, Kush, Sudan or Ethiopia, Put, Libya, Gomer, Turkey, Togarmah, also interpreted as Turkey or Central Asia. For most of history, these nations had no meaningful alliance. Right now, today, Russia, Iran, and Turkey have unprecedented military cooperation. They coordinate in Syria. They conduct joint military exercises. They share intelligence and weapons systems. Sudan has growing ties with Russia and Iran. Libya is fragmented, but Russian mercenaries operate there extensively. The coalition Ezekiel described 2,600 years ago exists today in a form it never has before. And this coalition is forming at the exact same time that Israel exists, controls Jerusalem, has regional peace agreements, is discussing temple construction, is surrounded by nations with the precise identities Ezekiel listed. These aren't separate prophecies with separate timelines. They're interconnected pieces of the same prophetic narrative. And they're all active, simultaneously, for the first time in history. The birth pangs acceleration. Jesus described the end times using the metaphor of birth pangs. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Matthew 24:8. The Greek word is Odin, birth pains. And birth pains have a specific characteristic. They increase in frequency and intensity as the birth approaches. Early labor, contractions every 30 minutes. Active labor, every 10 minutes. Transition, every 2 to 3 minutes. Then, birth. Look at the acceleration of prophetically significant events. 1948, Israel reborn after 1,878 years. 1967, Jerusalem reunified. 19 years later. 2020, regional framework. 53 years later. 2023, temple movement reaches operational readiness. 2024. Digital currency systems going live globally. The gaps are shrinking. The frequency is increasing. The intensity is building. That's not coincidence. That's the pattern Jesus described. Why Kushner matters. So back to Kushner. He's not the Antichrist, but He's the person who demonstrated that the impossible is now possible. For decades, prophecy scholars said a regional Middle East peace framework involving Israel couldn't happen without supernatural intervention or a uniquely powerful figure. Kushner proved them wrong. It took a political outsider with unconventional methods, but it happened. For decades, scholars said the technological infrastructure for global economic control was science fiction. Now it's operational. For decades, they said the temple movement was fringe fanaticism with no practical path to construction. Now the implements are ready and diplomatic frameworks exist that could provide access. Kushner didn't cause all of this, but his work in the Middle East pulled one of the final structural pieces into place. He showed the playbook. Real estate developer becomes senior advisor, becomes Middle East negotiator, becomes architect of regional framework, becomes private equity investor in the technological systems that integrate those same nations. No political experience required, no diplomatic credentials necessary, just access, relationships, and timing. If Kushner could do what he did, what could someone with actual governmental authority do? What could someone with military power do? What could someone with charismatic religious appeal do? What could someone who arrives during a genuine crisis do? The infrastructure Kushner helped build doesn't require him to operate it. It's a system, and systems can be controlled by whoever has the access codes, the crisis component. There's one piece missing: the global crisis that makes the impossible acceptable. Economic systems don't get replaced during stability. Digital currencies don't become mandatory when paper money works fine. Biometric systems don't become required when traditional ID functions. Regional security agreements don't lead to unified authority when individual sovereignty is secure. But what happens when the financial system collapses? Cyber attacks cripple infrastructure. War threatens global stability. Pandemic overwhelms healthcare systems. Food and energy supplies fail. Then the emergency measures become permanent. Then the temporary becomes mandatory. Then the population begs for security at any cost. We saw the pattern in 2020. Within weeks of a pandemic declaration, governments implemented controls that would have been unthinkable months earlier. Movement restrictions, business closures, gathering bans, digital health passports. The population accepted it because the alternatives seemed worse. That was one crisis, one virus. Imagine a convergent crisis: financial collapse, and cyber attack, and war, and pandemic, all simultaneously. The population would accept anything that promised stability, including centralized digital currency, including biometric identification, including unified regional security arrangements, including someone who promised to restore order. The generation question. Here's the question that matters. Are we the generation? The generation that sees the fig tree blossom and lives to see the fulfillment. The generation present when all the conditions align for the first time in history. We don't know. Jesus said no one knows the day or hour, but he also said we can know the season by watching the signs. And the signs aren't abstract anymore. They're concrete. They're documented. They're operational. Israel exists. Jerusalem is controlled by Israel. Regional agreements exist. The temple movement is prepared. The technology is built. The global systems are tested. The geopolitical coalitions are aligned. Everything described in Daniel, Ezekiel, Matthew, and Revelation that seemed impossible is now possible. And it all came together in the last 76 years. Most of it in the last 50 years. The critical pieces in the last 4 years. Kushner isn't the Antichrist, but he might be the proof that we're the generation that will see him, whoever he is, wherever he's waiting. The stage is set. The infrastructure is operational. All that's missing is the crisis to activate it and the person to take control. So let's answer the question directly. Is Jared Kushner the Antichrist? No, he doesn't meet the biblical criteria. He hasn't made a 7-year covenant. He doesn't have governmental authority. He hasn't desecrated a temple. He hasn't claimed divinity. He hasn't demanded worship. He hasn't performed supernatural signs. He hasn't broken an agreement. On every major prophetic checkpoint, he fails the test. Jared Kushner is not the Antichrist. But here's why that no should concern you more than a yes would do. If Jared Kushner, a real estate developer with no political experience, no diplomatic training, and no military power, could architect a regional Middle East peace framework that matches the structure of Daniel's prophecy, if he could create diplomatic conditions that make previously impossible scenarios suddenly plausible, if he could build relationships with authoritarian leaders and secure billions in investment for technological infrastructure, if he could do all of that as a private citizen operating in the background of someone else's administration, then what could someone with actual governmental authority do? What could someone with genuinely charismatic leader do? What could someone who arrives during a genuine crisis do? Not just political turmoil, but genuine global catastrophe. Convince the world to accept. Kushner revealed the playbook. He showed that the systems can be built, that the frameworks can be established, that the infrastructure can be operational, all without anyone noticing until it's complete. The question isn't whether Kushner is the Antichrist. The question is, if he could get this far without being noticed, how far could the actual Antichrist get? We're not watching for a candidate anymore. We're watching a stage that's already been built. The Abrahamic Accords framework exists. The technological systems are operational. The temple movement is prepared. The geopolitical coalitions are aligned. All the conditions that scholars said would require the tribulation to force into existence, they already exist. Right now, in 2024. We're not waiting for the world to become ready for the Antichrist. We're living in a world that's already ready. We're just waiting for the crisis that demands activation and the person willing to take control. The next major global crisis, financial, military, technological, or biological, will be the test. Will populations accept centralized control if it's presented as the solution? Will nations surrender sovereignty if unified authority promises security? Will individuals accept biometric financial systems if the alternative is economic collapse? 2020 suggested the answer is yes. But 2020 was contained. The next crisis might not be. And when it comes, the infrastructure won't need to be built. It already exists, thanks to people like Jared Kushner, who isn't the Antichrist, but who might have built his throne. What happened in Jerusalem 3 weeks ago suggests the timeline just accelerated. But that's a different discussion for a different time.
Why is Jared Kushner's name appearing so frequently in discussions about the Antichrist? This is not a local conversation. It is not limited to prophecy circles. It is emerging in political commentary.
September 15th, 2020. The White House South Lawn. Under a blazing sun, 3 nations signed an agreement that hadn't seemed possible 6 months earlier. Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain. Standing between them, orchestrating handshakes that rewrote 70 years of Middle Eastern hostility, was a man with no diplomatic training, no military background, no previous experience in international relations. Jared Kushner had done what career diplomats said couldn't be done. He'd brought multiple Arab nations into formal peace with Israel. He'd created what they called the Abraham Accords. And within 48 hours, a question started appearing in prophecy circles, political forums, and academic discussions across 3 continents. The same question, asked by people who never talk to each other, people who disagree about everything else. Why does this agreement look exactly like the structure Daniel described 2,600 years ago? Why does it involve many nations and Israel? And why is the man who built it showing up in patterns that match the biblical description of the figure who comes before the end? That question hasn't gone away. It's gotten louder. Because what happened on that September afternoon wasn't just politics, it was architecture. The kind of framework that prophecy watchers had been tracking for decades suddenly took physical form. Multiple nations, Israel at the center, economic integration, military cooperation, technology sharing, all of it formalized in documents with legal weight. all of it negotiated by someone who appeared on the world stage through channels that bypass every traditional requirement for international influence. Kushner wasn't elected. He wasn't appointed through normal diplomatic procedures. He had no credentials that would qualify him for a role at this level. Yet within 3 years, he sat across negotiating tables from crown princes, prime ministers, and regional power brokers who had refused to meet with seasoned diplomats for generations. He succeeded where professionals had failed for 50 years. That's not normal political advancement. That's the kind of rise Daniel 11:21 describes when it speaks of a leader who comes without warning and obtains power by intrigue. The verse doesn't say he storms in through military conquest. It says he slips into position through strategic influence and timing. What makes September 15, 2020 different from every other Middle East peace ceremony is what it set in motion. Morocco joined 4 months later. Sudan followed. Saudi Arabia began quiet normalization even without formal signing. By the end of 2021, the framework Kushner built had pulled 6 nations into agreements with Israel that included trade routes, aviation deals, tourism, intelligence sharing, and technology partnerships worth hundreds of billions of dollars. The region that had defined itself by opposition to Israel for 3 generations suddenly pivoted. And the man who made it happen has a detail in his background that keeps surfacing in these discussions. His family owns a building in Manhattan. The address is 666 Fifth Avenue. Most people dismiss it, a coincidence, a numeric quirk that means nothing. But when that number belongs to someone who just created a multi-nation covenant structure involving Israel, people studying Revelation 13:18 stop dismissing it. They start asking why the pieces keep aligning around one person. This isn't about proving anything yet. This is about recognizing that something unprecedented is happening. The conditions described in ancient prophecy are appearing in modern geopolitics, and they're appearing around a figure whose rise, timing, and achievements don't match any conventional pattern. The question isn't whether Jared Kushner is the Antichrist. The question is why the environment forming around him looks exactly like the one Daniel said would exist when that figure emerges, and whether what happened on September 15, 2020 was the beginning of a sequence that prophecy has been warning about for 2,600 years. Every generation produces candidates, names that appear in prophecy discussions for a few months or years before fading into historical footnotes. Political leaders who seem powerful until their influence collapses. Military figures who dominate headlines until the next crisis replaces them. Religious personalities who gather followings until scandal or irrelevance removes them from consideration. The pattern repeats. A figure rises. Prophecy watchers notice. Speculation builds. Then the conditions fail to materialize. The temple doesn't appear. The covenant doesn't form, global authority doesn't consolidate, and the conversation.
Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more awe-inspiring stories of faith, survival, and miracles.
Moves on. Kushner is different, not because he's more dramatic or more obviously sinister, because the discussion around him hasn't faded, it's intensified. 3 years after leaving the White House, his name still appears in prophecy analysis with the same frequency it did during his peak influence. The reason isn't his personality, it's the infrastructure he left behind. The Abraham Accords didn't disappear when the Trump administration ended. They expanded. New nations joined. Economic partnerships deepened. Military cooperation increased. The framework Kushner built became permanent architecture in Middle Eastern geopolitics, and that architecture continues reshaping the region in ways that align with prophetic patterns. But here's what most people miss. The accords themselves aren't the fulfillment of Daniel 9:27. They can't be. They lack the specific 7-year framework the prophecy requires. They don't include provisions about temple worship. They haven't been broken at a midpoint.
every technical requirement prophecy scholars use to evaluate the covenant with many remains unfulfilled.
So why does Kushner's name persist in these discussions? Because what he created is a prototype, a proof of concept. He demonstrated that multi-nation agreements involving Israel are no longer theoretical. He showed that Arab states will normalize relations under the right conditions. He proved that economic integration can override decades of religious and political hostility. He built a model that future agreements can expand upon. Think about what didn't exist before September 2020. No modern precedent for multiple Arab nations simultaneously recognizing Israel. No framework for regional economic integration that included Israeli technology, Emirati capital, and Bahraini banking. No aviation agreements connecting Tel Aviv to Abu Dhabi. No tourism infrastructure allowing Israelis to visit Dubai's hotels. Kushner didn't just negotiate peace, he created entirely new systems, and those systems are the foundation for something larger. When Daniel describes a future covenant involving many nations, he's describing exactly the kind of multilateral framework the Abraham Accords established. Not the same agreement, but the same structure. This is where the timing becomes significant. Israel regained independence in 1948. It recaptured Jerusalem in 1967, but for 53 years after controlling the city, the nation remained isolated from its neighbors. Peace existed with Egypt and Jordan. Cold peace, formal but minimal. No other Arab state would touch normalization. Then Kushner appeared, and within 3 years the equation reversed. What seemed impossible for 2 generations suddenly became normal. The question prophecy watchers ask is why now? What changed in 2017 that made this possible? The surface answer is obvious. Trump's presidency gave Kushner access. His relationship with Netanyahu provided credibility with Israel. His business connections in the Gulf opened doors with Arab leaders. The combination created opportunity. But the deeper answer involves forces larger than one administration. Saudi Arabia needed regional allies against Iran. The UAE wanted Western technology and economic diversification. Bahrain required Saudi permission for any diplomatic move. Morocco wanted U.S. recognition of its territorial claims. Sudan needed removal from the state sponsor of terrorism list. Kushner didn't create these pressures, he recognized them, and he built an agreement structure that gave each party what they needed while pulling them all into formal relationship with Israel. That's not just diplomacy, that's architectural thinking. Seeing how pieces fit together before others recognize the pattern. Daniel 11:21 describes this exact quality. The future ruler doesn't conquer through obvious force. He understands how to position influence, how to offer solutions that seem beneficial to all parties while serving a larger design, how to make the impossible look inevitable. When you examine Kushner's negotiating approach, the parallels are uncomfortable. He didn't strong-arm Arab states into accepting Israel. He showed them how normalization served their interests. He made them want the agreement. He positioned himself as the architect of their success rather than an outside imposer. This is where the discussion moves from political analysis to prophetic pattern recognition, because the Bible doesn't describe the Antichrist as an obvious villain. It describes someone who solves problems, someone who brings peace, someone who appears as a benefactor before revealing his true purpose. The Abraham Accords brought peace, measurable, documented peace. Airlines fly routes that didn't exist. Trade flows through channels that were closed. Tourists visit sites they couldn't access. Technology companies partner across borders that were sealed. By every conventional metric, Kushner created something positive. But prophecy warns that the final deception won't look evil at first. It will look like solutions, like progress, like the answer everyone was seeking. The covenant with many isn't described as an obvious trap. It's described as an agreement that people want, that nations sign willingly, that appears to solve long-standing conflicts. Only at the midpoint does its true nature emerge.
Only when the leader breaks the covenant and turns on Israel does the deception become visible. Until that moment, it looks like the peace the world has been waiting for. This is why Kushner's achievement generates such intense scrutiny. Not because he did something obviously sinister, because he did something that matches the pattern of what prophecy says will happen before the end. He created regional peace involving Israel and multiple nations. He built economic integration. He established frameworks for cooperation. All things the world celebrates. All things that also happen to align with the structure Daniel warned about. The second factor keeping his name in circulation is his continued involvement in the region. He didn't retire from Middle East engagement when he left government. He launched Affinity Partners, an investment firm that raised $2 billion primarily from Saudi Arabia's public investment fund. The money flows into technology companies, many of them operating in Israel and the Gulf states. He's still building connections, still deepening economic ties, still positioning himself at the intersection of Israeli innovation and Arab capital. The infrastructure he created as a government official is now the foundation for his private business. The relationships remain active. The influence continues. Most former White House advisors fade into consulting or speaking circuits. Kushner went deeper into exact the region where his diplomatic work focused. He's not maintaining relationships, he's expanding them. And the expansion involves the kind of technology that prophecy watchers find significant. Affinity Partners has invested in artificial intelligence companies, cybersecurity firms, fintech platforms, biometric identification systems. These aren't random tech sectors. These are the exact categories that could enable the kind of economic control Revelation 13:16-17 describes. The ability to restrict who can buy and sell. The infrastructure for a mark-based system. Is Kushner deliberately building tools for a future Antichrist system? Almost certainly not. Is he building tools that such a system could use? That's a different question, and it's a question that keeps his name relevant in prophecy discussions even after his government role ended. The third element is the reaction he generates, not from prophecy communities, from secular analysts, from political commentators who have no religious framework for interpretation. They notice something unusual about his trajectory, his access, his success in areas where he had no expertise. A 2019 Vanity Fair article questioned how someone with his background ended up negotiating Middle East peace. A Washington Post analysis examined his security clearance issues and wondered who was actually directing his policy decisions. Foreign policy journals ran pieces about the unconventional nature of his diplomatic approach. These aren't prophecy publications. These are mainstream outlets recognizing that something about his rise doesn't follow normal patterns.
When secular observers notice the same anomalies that prophecy watchers identify, it suggests the pattern is real, not imagined, not invented by people looking for end-time signs, actually present in the events themselves. The fourth factor is what hasn't happened yet. Saudi Arabia never signed the Abraham Accords. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman came close. Negotiations advanced. Plans were drafted. Then the Biden administration entered office and the momentum paused. Saudi normalization with Israel remains the missing piece, the largest prize, the agreement that would truly reshape the entire region. And Kushner maintains the closest Western relationship with MBS of any non-government official. Their connection survived the Khashoggi crisis. It survived the administration change. It survived the shift from political power to private business. The bond remains intact, which means if Saudi normalization ever happens, Kushner's network will be part of the foundation even if he holds no official role. This creates a scenario where the framework he built could expand beyond what currently exists, where the prototype could evolve into something more comprehensive, where the multi-nation structure could add the one player that would give it true regional dominance. Not through Kushner's direct involvement necessarily, but through the architecture he established. Prophecy doesn't require that the person who builds the preliminary framework is the same person who activates the final covenant. It only requires that the framework exists when the time comes, and that framework now exists, functional, proven, ready for expansion. The fifth element is the temple movement in Jerusalem. This is where the discussion shifts from political analysis to prophetic necessity, because Daniel 9:27 isn't just about a covenant, it's about what happens in the middle of that covenant. The leader puts an end to sacrifice and offering. He enters the temple. He commits what Daniel calls the abomination that causes desolation. None of that can happen without a functioning temple. For 1950 years, that made the prophecy theoretical, impossible to fulfill. The Second Temple was destroyed in 70 AD. No serious possibility of reconstruction existed while the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque occupied the Temple Mount. The political barriers seemed absolute. But in the same years Kushner was negotiating the Abraham Accords, the temple movement in Israel accelerated. The Temple Institute completed all the implements required for temple service. They wove the priestly garments. They identified and trained potential priests from the Levitical line. They produced architectural plans. They announced the birth of red heifers, animals required for the purification ceremony that must precede temple service. These aren't fringe activities anymore. Israeli government officials now openly discuss temple reconstruction. Rabbinical courts have issued rulings on temple procedures. Financing is in place. The only remaining barrier is political access to the Temple Mount, which is exactly where the Abraham Accords become relevant, because the agreements Kushner negotiated included quiet understandings about Jerusalem access, about shared administration of holy sites, about frameworks for religious cooperation that didn't exist before. He didn't solve the Temple Mount issue, but he created diplomatic channels that could address it. He proved that previously non-negotiable positions can shift under the right conditions. When the temple movement and the multi-nation covenant framework advance simultaneously, prophecy watchers recognize the pattern, not as proof that fulfillment is happening now, as evidence that the conditions for fulfillment are forming, that pieces separated for 2,000 years are moving into proximity. And at the center of both movements stands the same figure, the man who built the diplomatic framework, the man whose business investments now flow into the same region, the man whose name appears in discussions about both peace agreements and prophetic timelines. Kushner hasn't fulfilled Daniel's prophecy, but he's revealed that the prophecy is no longer theoretical. The multi-nation covenant structure exists. The temple preparations are advancing. The technology for economic control is operational. The regional alignment is shifting. And these changes happened on an accelerated timeline that coincides exactly with his period of maximum influence. That's why his name persists. Not because he's obviously the Antichrist, because he's demonstrated that the world described in Daniel is now possible. And once possibility becomes reality, the question changes. It's no longer, could this ever happen? It becomes, when will it happen? And who will be standing in position when it does? Daniel 9:27 is the reason this discussion exists. Without this single verse, Kushner would be a former White House advisor with interesting Middle East achievements, nothing more. But this verse creates a template, a checklist, a specific description of events that must occur in a precise sequence. And when modern events start resembling that sequence, even loosely, the verse gets re-examined. The prophecy states, he will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7. In the middle of the 7, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. And at the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation, until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. 43 words in English, fewer in the original Hebrew, but these words have generated more prophetic analysis than almost any other passage in Scripture, because they provide the timeline for the final 7 years before Christ's return, the period Christians call the tribulation,
the time when the Antichrist's true nature is revealed. Every word matters. Every detail is specific. This isn't symbolic poetry. It's a technical description of political and religious events that can be verified when they occur, which means it can also be used to evaluate whether current events match the pattern. Start with the first phrase. He will confirm a covenant with many. Not create a covenant, confirm one. The Hebrew word used here means to strengthen, to make firm, to establish something that already has foundation. This suggests the agreement isn't entirely new. It builds on existing frameworks or strengthens previous arrangements. The Abraham Accords didn't emerge from nothing. They built on decades of quiet cooperation between Israel and Gulf states, intelligence sharing that existed in shadows, economic ties that operated through third parties, security coordination against common threats. Kushner didn't invent Israeli-Arab cooperation. He brought it into the open. He formalized it. He confirmed what was already developing beneath the surface. This matches the prophetic language more closely than most people realize. The future covenant won't appear as a shocking break from everything that came before. It will formalize and strengthen patterns already in motion. It will make official what was previously informal. It will confirm existing trajectories. The next word is crucial. Many, not one nation, not two, many. The Hebrew word is rabim. It means numerous, abundant, great in number. It requires multiple parties. This eliminates bilateral agreements. It eliminates simple peace treaties between two states. It requires a coalition, a multilateral framework involving numerous participants. For most of Israel's modern history, this seemed impossible. Egypt signed a peace treaty in 1979, one nation. Jordan followed in 1994, two nations total. For the next 26 years, no progress, no movement toward many. Then, in 2020, the number jumped. UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco. 4 nations in 4 months. 6 nations total in formal peace with Israel. And this doesn't count the quiet normalization happening with Saudi Arabia, Oman, and others who haven't signed but have opened channels. The shift from 2 to 6 might not sound dramatic, but in prophetic terms, it's the difference between impossible and established pattern.
2 nations can be explained as isolated exceptions. 6 nations represent a framework, a structure, a model that others can join, which is exactly what many requires. The covenant is for 1/7. In Hebrew, 7 is the word Shabuah. It can mean a week of days or a week of years. In prophetic context, particularly in Daniel, it means 7 years. The angel Gabriel was explaining a timeline of 77s decreed for Israel. 69 of those 7s were fulfilled. 1 remains, the final 7 years. This is the non-negotiable time frame. The covenant must have a defined 7-year duration, not open-ended peace, not indefinite normalization, a specific 7-year period. This is where the Abraham Accords clearly fall short. They contain no expiration date, no 7-year term, no defined endpoint, which means they cannot be the fulfillment of Daniel 9:27. They structurally resemble it. They establish the multi-nation framework it describes, but they lack the temporal specificity the prophecy requires. They're the prototype, not the final product. But here's what changed. Before 2020, the idea of any multi-nation covenant with Israel seemed impossible. Now it's proven reality. The gap between proven reality and prophetic fulfillment is much smaller than the gap between impossibility and proven reality. The Accords demonstrated that the final covenant is logistically feasible. The mechanics work. Nations will sign. The framework holds. All that's missing is the 7-year time frame, and the right crisis could provide that. Economic collapse requiring a defined recovery period. Regional war demanding a structured peace timeline. Global instability necessitating measurable commitments. any number of scenarios could transform an open-ended agreement into a fixed 7-year covenant. The prophecy continues in the middle of the 7. This is the mathematical center: 3.5 years, 42 months, 1,260 days. Scripture uses all these measurements to describe the same midpoint. This is when everything changes, when the mask comes off, when the leader who brought peace reveals his true purpose. He will put an end to sacrifice and offering. This requires a functioning sacrificial system, which requires a temple, which requires access to the Temple Mount, which requires either Muslim agreement, Israeli military control, or some hybrid arrangement that allows Jewish worship on the site. For 1,950 years, this verse was theoretical. No temple existed, no sacrifices occurred, no system operated that could be stopped. But the temple movement has changed the equation. The implements are ready, the priests are trained, the animals are prepared. The only missing element is political access. And political access is exactly what diplomatic agreements can provide. This is where Kushner's work intersects directly with prophetic requirements. The Abraham Accords didn't address the Temple Mount explicitly in public documents, but they created frameworks for shared religious site administration. They established precedents for previously impossible cooperation. They proved that barriers considered absolute can fall under the right conditions. If temple access ever becomes reality, it will happen through some evolution of the diplomatic architecture Kushner built, not because he planned it that way, because that's the only existing framework that could accommodate such an arrangement. The Accords are the foundation. Temple access would be the next level built on that foundation. The prophecy describes what happens at the midpoint. The leader will set up an abomination that causes desolation. Jesus referenced this exact phrase in Matthew 24:15. Paul expanded on it in 2 Thessalonians 2:4, describing a man who sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. This is self-deification. The leader enters the holy place and demands worship. He doesn't just break the covenant politically, he commits spiritual blasphemy. He claims divine authority. And this act triggers the second half of the 7 years, the period of greatest tribulation. None of this has happened. No leader has entered a temple. No one has proclaimed himself God in the holy place. No abomination has been set up. These events are still future, which means the prophecy remains unfulfilled. But the components are assembling. The multi-nation framework exists. The temple preparations are advancing. The technology for the mark system is operational. The regional alignment is shifting. What was scattered across centuries of impossibility is now concentrated in a single generation's reality. Daniel's prophecy also identifies who makes the covenant, not by name, by position and character. The he in verse 27 connects to the ruler who will come in verse 26. This ruler comes from the people who destroyed the city and the sanctuary. Historical analysis points to Rome. The Roman Empire destroyed Jerusalem and the Second Temple in 70 AD. This suggests the future leader emerges from a revived Roman Empire, or from the geographic territory Rome controlled, or from a political system that inherits Rome's law, governance structures, and imperial reach. The United States could be understood as Rome's heir in that sense. American power projects globally as Rome's did regionally. American law derives from Roman legal principles. American governance includes Roman republican elements. If Roman means Western Empire rather than geographic Europe, Kushner fits. But this is speculative interpretation, not clear fulfillment. It's an attempt to make pieces fit rather than pieces fitting naturally. And that's important to acknowledge. Not every element of Kushner's profile aligns. Some pieces require interpretive stretching. Some require redefining traditional understandings. Some don't fit at all. The prophecy's final phrase describes the ruler's end, until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. This is divine judgment. The leader's power is temporary. His rule ends in destruction.